So welcome to this month's Heart Bunch video brought to you by the Utah State University Extension's Health Extension Advocacy Research and Teaching Initiative, or as we are sometimes called, the HEART Initiative. We're calling this segment Heart to Heart, where Heart faculty interview a guest about a specific topic. My name is Gabby, and I'm joined here by Ashley, my Heart colleague, and guest Melissa Flint, and we're going to be talking about grief and loss during the holidays. So I wanted to welcome and thank you for joining us to talk about this topic. And I wanted to start out with the question for Melissa. Just tell us about yourself and your background, including your experience with grief and loss during the holidays, professional or otherwise.
My name is Melissa Flint, and I have worked in social work for the past probably 20 plus years. Prior to working at where I currently do with USU, I was a hospice and healthcare social worker. So during that time, we helped people grieving and at end of life, as far as helping them to get through some of the grief and loss of losing a loved one, as well as the challenges that come with end of life and preparing for end of life.
And we're just kind of going to ask questions back and forth. And so our next question, feel free to expand on anything. What is grief and what can it look like when we're talking about grief?
Okay, well, grief is it's anything that causes a deep sorrow or a loss. It can be the loss of a loved one. It doesn't, that's the most common, but it doesn't just pertain to the loss of a loved one. It can be a divorce. It can be a job loss, anything that causes deep sorrow and a real change of lifestyle that can cause that feeling of loss. It causes grief. And it's very individual for people, but there are a few kind of noticeable changes. And so physically, there might be trembling, nausea, trouble breathing, muscle weakness, dry mouth, trouble sleeping or eating. Those can be common, but they're not excluded. There are other, if you feel something else, that's okay too. Emotionally, there can be deep sadness or sorrow. There can be crying or tearfulness or just general moodiness. These are normal with grief. So don't, like I said, everybody is individual, but you may feel some of these changes if you're experiencing grief. Be patient with yourself and your loved ones as they go through these changes.
Personal experience and a personal response. So I love that you say that anything that someone is experiencing is totally normal, if especially if it's something that you didn't say, just because it is such a personal thing, and so since we're talking about it in the context of the holidays, how do we acknowledge that loss or that grief during the holidays? How can people cope with it and kind of acknowledge it and manage it and understand it during this time?
I think one of the first things is to recognize that there will be a difference, and don't be afraid to talk about the difference. If dad always carved the turkey or mom always made the pies and they're not there anymore, it's different, right? The holiday is a little bit different than it was before. One of the ways to help acknowledge it is actually just to plan to talk about it ahead of time. If you wait to talk about it during the event, it can get emotions kind of run really high at that time. So it's one of those things that if you can talk about it a little bit ahead, it's good. Don't assume you know how everybody feels, and respect each other's feelings. If things get heated, make sure that you're taking a break so that you have time. And if you don't do it during the holidays, you usually, if you do it before, you have a little bit of time for that. There are a lot of ideas and ways to acknowledge a loved one on holidays. You can have ornaments that have that person on them. There's balloon ceremonies. Everybody can write a message on a balloon, and you can release it during the holiday. There's you can display a photograph of a loved one during the holiday, or leave an empty seat at the table. So everybody acknowledges that person. You can have a moment of silence or a moment of celebration where everybody goes around the room and talks about a loved one. There are lots of things. You can volunteer in a loved one's name. You can create a new tradition. And this is something, You can choose to let some traditions go and just simply create a new one if it's too hard. Or you can, one other thing that I think is hard for people sometimes is you can simply avoid a situation that is too hard right now. Now, there's a fine line, and you want to make sure that you're not showing a lot of signs and symptoms of just depression and you're isolating yourself from everybody. But if a situation is too hard and you want to change that situation, say it's too hard to go to this Thanksgiving meal, and I'm going to go have my own Thanksgiving meal at a place where I used to go with my dad. It's okay. You can do that. Things can change. And that's what we want to know, is that grief can change a little bit for everybody. Everybody gets to be different in the way they handle it. Some things to remember because of that is remember to support everybody's individual choices. Invite people, but don't push. Like, try not to push people. Be prepared for plans to change for people, especially at first, and send thoughtful letters or cards. Generic cards just are not, it's not the time to do that if you're sending them to a loved one who's grieving. Listen without minimizing or judging and giving advice. Just listen sometimes. And then the big thing we want to do is remember that grief is, it has no time limit. So just because you got through last holiday doesn't mean you might not need to prepare for this year's holiday. So we want to make sure that we understand that. I kind of relate it to, we've talked a little about grief being kind of like if you put a ball in a box and there was a button that it could hit every once in a while. And at first that ball is really, really big inside that box and it's bumping into it and you're having all of this emotion, but over time it gets smaller. And it doesn't mean that it's still not going to hit that button at a certain time and you're going to have those emotions. So it's good to prepare for it and to acknowledge that it could be there.
That's so great. And I think some of those strategies are really lovely and highlight again the uniqueness that each person will experience, and each holiday is different for people. Traditions are different, right? So I think talking it's not one size fits all, it makes a lot of sense that your grieving process and the way that you acknowledge it during the holidays will be different. And take time to figure out what works well for you over that time as that ball shrinks, right?
Yes.
So, and it might change over time. That's really interesting. So since we're talking about over time, what does prolonged or extended grief look like? And when should we consider talking with a therapist or doctor about that?
So first off, I would want to say, never be afraid to reach out to a doctor or a counselor or somebody if you feel that grief is becoming or is just simply too much for you to handle at that point in your life. There's no time frame that you shouldn't, if you know yourself and if you feel like this is too much for you to handle, please reach out to somebody. Grief is a natural response to a loss of a loved one, especially, and it should be, but it should begin, like I said, with that ball, it should begin to decrease in symptoms over time. But if prolonged grief is intense and it's persistent and it can start to interfere with your daily life, you're just not getting out anymore. You're just not doing the things that used to bring you happiness and joy. If those are stopped, in that case, it's often helpful to reach out to a doctor or a therapist regarding the ways that you can begin to kind of getting back to daily life and decreasing some of those signs and symptoms. There are support groups that offer support and comfort for those dealing with grief, as well as, like, for some, grief can be like one part of it is grief can be traumatizing to people, and in that processing that with a professional can really help you to deal with the trauma of that grief and get back to your daily life as well, and get back a little bit sooner than you might be able to without it.
I remember seeing, and I don't remember where this was, but I remember an image that was shared after a presentation or something like that. And it was an image of what everybody thinks grief looks like. And it was this long, one straight line, but what grief actually looks like. And it was a tangled mess of just nothing,
Yeah.
just like this tangled ball. And so it's true. It could be messy, but again, there are ways and strategies and hope and comfort in knowing that there is a way through it, and there is a way to come out on the other side where you feel more, supported and loved, and you kind of you feel a little more sure-footed, I guess. I don't know if that's the best way
Yeah.
to put it, but the resources and some of those things that you were talking about reaching out to, can you expand upon that? Like, what are some other resources, or what are some tips or strategies that people can use,
Okay.
or that people can kind of lean on, maybe from after watching this video, or really wanting to reach out to somebody?
Okay, yeah, there are a lot of books and articles on grief, especially around the holidays. So you can look online, but make sure you're looking at credible sites and articles by like licensed professionals that you're reading. Search like local grief groups in your area. You can do that as well, and also ask your doctor or therapist if there are groups specific to you. Reach out to a senior center. They deal a lot with grief support at senior centers, and church leaders and families or friends. Like, don't be afraid. Never be afraid to ask if there's something out there for you. And if you know someone with a recent loss, I would say check in on them once in a while and offer them information. That being said, there are certain websites that you can go to as well that are more accredited. The American Counseling Association, it's counseling.org. And then you can even just say, you can look up grief around the holidays, especially if you're having a hard time with that. The American Psychiatric Association is apa.org. They're another one that would have articles on that, as well as like the Association of Social Workers, aswb.org, and they can help you. If you're simply looking for a therapist, I would, we always have to check with our insurance to know if certain ones are covered, but you can go to psychologytoday.com and it lists psychologists at your zip code, and then you can cross-reference it to the ones that are actually on your insurance.
That's a great list. And I guess, that was a lot of information all at once. And so it's probably going to take time for people to think through everything that we've talked about and find what works for them. And like we talked about, it can change. And I love the analogy of the ball that's really big in the box, and then over time it's getting smaller. Are there any other things that you're hoping to share with people watching this video, talking about grief through the holidays, or any other thoughts that you've had as we've been talking today?
I think some of the main ones are just recognizing how individualized grief is. We're all so different and we feel things so differently. Holidays can be a hard time because we start to get around loved ones and we kind of revert back to those old feelings and old ways that we did things. And in doing that, it can kind of trigger us to have some behaviors that aren't always great, especially if we're struggling. So I would just say, try to plan around that a little bit, and recognize to give each other a little bit of a break. Let everybody deal with their grief and the things they're dealing with the way they need to, and so that they can allow you to do so in turn. Those would be kind of my biggest suggestions, is just recognize that we're all going to deal with it a little bit different. Don't be hard on yourself and don't be hard on each other. Just do what you find can work for you.
Well, I really appreciate your time. We hope that anybody who's watching this video finds this information helpful, and you are able to reach out to any resources that we shared, or any resources that you find online as well, and within friends and family and support groups. And again, we thank you for your time. Thanks, Melissa. We really appreciate you coming on and providing your expertise. And thank you, Ashley, my colleague, for joining me. Check us out on our next Heart to Heart video segment. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.